this week I am positive that it is episode 341. I went in blind last week and wasn't sure, and Melanie had me all discombobulated. We added somebody new. Today I didn't even invite her to the podcast, so we're taping, hours later because, the invitation wasn't there. And
hey, we're all here. That's what counts.
You know what? We talked during our staff meeting today about not being afraid to admit when you make mistakes. And we appreciate you just already putting that right into practice.
Good job, Randy.
And, but I guess I should own that I could have said something too. So...
Well, and honestly,
and I could have asked.
Just didn't.
So there we go.
I just didn't.
We're all on point. So, hey, I have a request.
Go for it.
We're 9 episodes away, so I don't feel like I feel like at 350 we keep not doing awesome things.
That's true. We
need to do something awesome for 350. We need to go somewhere. We need to do like one with where people can come in and.
Man, 350. We're
I vote for Hawaii.
Yeah, I'm with you that.
Ooh.
Or a cruise. We just do the podcast cruise version.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like just a weekend, right? Like a long weekend.
Yeah, so whoever wants to sponsor that, let us know.
Podcast at WholeLife.Church.
Yeah,
there we go.
Yeah, we're just looking for a large sponsor.
We'll send you our Venmo. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Although, unexpected challenges. So now we have an unexpected challenge, and that's what we talked about this week. And now we have one for 350. So if you have an idea of, hey, I've got a cool backyard, I'd be willing to throw a pizza in the stone brick oven that I have in my backyard and feed a bunch of people that came over. That'd be great.
Dessert business, whatever. Something along those lines.
Because I'm still really wanting that gelato. We got to find some more. We got to find a gelato place. Maybe that's it.
My heart is broken. That one just closed down. And
I know, but we had the best time, and that's why we need to.
Time.
That's why we need to go outside our walls.
Yeah.
Podcast 350. If you have any ideas, let us know. I would. At this point, all offers will be listened to. Closer we get, we'll start whittling it down. But tell me who Josephus is. Because I
did not do a good job of explaining that, did I?
No, you did. You did, but you kind of gave us a little background, but for as important as this guy seems to be, we don't hear that. I mean, it's not like you hear that. I've heard of Bocephus, but I've never heard of Josephus. And I'm like, so who in the world is Josephus, and how come I don't know more about him?
Well, probably because you have not been hanging out in theological circles.
That's probably my
circles.
problem.
Josephus is he's pretty well known within the theological arena because he wrote one of the more authoritative histories of the Jewish nation that's outside of what we would consider the canonical Bible. Basically, he was I hope I'm not going to mess this up because you didn't warn me ahead, but he was a Jewish priest. Am I right on that, Melanie?
I know he was Jewish, and I know he was a historian. I'm not sure about
good. Okay,
I think on Wikipedia, I think I read that.
He's a Jewish priest, and basically he was also a general, and he was fighting against the Romans. He eventually threw in the towel with them, and in order to earn their good favor, started writing a history of the Jewish people for the Romans. At that time, it was a very popular thing for Romans to like to read the stories of the people they'd conquered. And so he started putting it together to provide insight into them. He also kind of was a little bit of, some of the Jewish people consider him to be a little bit of a turncoat in that he kind of became very Roman in the way he went about doing things. And so, so he wrote these, I want to say he wrote these after the fall of the Jewish temple. So he was around when Jesus was alive. He would have been a young guy at that point. And he, like I said, he's very contemporary to the disciples and to what we would consider the gospel writers. So
this really just adds more support to the biblical record.
Yeah, it does. He's considered to be marginally reliable. You go ahead and throw any historian's account of history, and you'll have 5 people that poke holes in it. You're like, oh, you didn't get this right, you didn't get that right. And there are things that Josephus demonstrably does not get right. He definitely tries to take a certain slant to the way that he's doing his history. He wants the Romans to feel proud of being able to conquer the Jewish people, so he sometimes puffs them up to be a little bit more hard to beat than they were. And then, and anyway, so there's some interesting things in there. The other book that I referenced by Dr. Magnus, who's the UNC archaeology chair, she actually has a small section kind of devoted to Josephus and things he wrote. And if you're looking for that book, Randy will have it in the show notes. That's actually an Audible. I listened to that one on Audible, and it's based off of her lectures to her students at UNC, and it's I think it's called Uncovering the Holy Land. So really interesting stuff. She's not necessarily Christian, so just that's my little caveat on there. Don't go in expecting to hear a Christian perspective. It's a secular perspective on the Bible, and it's really fascinating. You'll learn some things.
Well, I found the message to be really interesting, and I sent it to my mom as well because I knew she'd find it interesting. I mean, I love anything history. And so when you get this other kind of supporting cast or supporting people that don't come from the Bible, but seem to come up with almost the same thing, other than the babies, you explained that Matthew was the only one.
Yeah.
But why do you think? Doesn't that just drive you crazy when it's kind of an unknown? Or why do you think it's there if nobody else caught it? Or is it just we have to trust it because this is the Bible, and maybe not Josephus because he doesn't mention it and he's only, what did you say, marginally reliable? So,
no history includes everything, does it?
No,
so
that's true.
Just because Josephus doesn't include it doesn't mean, it doesn't really mean that it what didn't happen or couldn't have happened. At the same time, historians who say, well, Matthew's the only one who mentions it, nobody else does. They have a point. I mean, that's when you only have one source as a reporter, you kind of look at it a little bit, but at the same time, as a Christian, I consider the Bible to be reliable. And with the worldview that I have, I consider the Bible to be reliable. And so that's why I can take it at its face value the way that I do.
And the way you described Herod, it wasn't on a character at all.
Not at all. For him to kill 20 babies was not even close to over the top for him. Based on, I mean, he was just, when you kill the woman you literally love. I mean, he really loved this woman. He really did. And then, he made his, I believe I'm getting this right. He basically made his wife's young brother, the high priest, decide that was a mistake, sent this guy down to Jericho and had him drowned while he was on his trip down to Jericho. Then murders his wife because he's been told by somebody who didn't like her that she was having an affair on him, even though there's no evidence that happened. Yeah. He was very intent on keeping control of his kingdom. And in Western culture, we have a value on life that I think is generally good. And I shouldn't say generally good. I like it that we have a high value for life. I think that maybe we don't have a high value for all lives all the time. It's interesting, the lives that get lost, that get highlighted versus the ones that don't. If somebody's worked in the media, I think that you got to acknowledge that. It's
a real thing.
It's a real thing.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, you don't see mass executions in the United States. You don't see public executions in the States.
Well, not by the president for sure.
And in Josephus's time, according to Josephus, the Romans would crucify 1,000 people at a time.
Wow.
In a public place. And so the value on life in that time was a little bit less in a public place than in the United States right now. And so when you think about 20 babies being murdered, it's a horrible, horrendous thing. And there's no justifying any time, place, or culture. And yet in that time, place, and culture, it would not have necessarily been considered over the top for a king who was trying to retain his place and thought that a baby might be trying to take his place. And so I think that's one of the things we kind of have to wrap our minds around with Herod, not to excuse it or to justify it, but to try to understand what was happening in its context.
But honestly, I didn't find that much of a disconnect in the fact that, I mean, we look at Herod, and the more that you stop and think about it and all the crazy stuff that you highlighted that he did, but thinking about how we react a lot of times, maybe not on the same scale, but the things that we see Herod doing, trying to take control and trying to have control to make sure every last piece only makes sure that he's the best, he's not challenged. And we're reading a book at staff called Discipleship. And this morning we were talking about how all of this is based in control when you're moving towards making sure that you have control. And I thought, how many times have we gone about our lives planning and scheming and, well, when I do this, that's going to open this up, and then I can do this, and then, well, that's totally going to make this available. And we forget to pray about it. We forget to ask God about it. And I wonder that, you said that, constant fear leads to violence. And like, how many different forms can that violence take, whether it's emotional, physical, psychological, and how we treat others? And I think we have a lot more in common with Herod than we think sometimes.
I think we do too. And I was glad you mentioned the fear part, Ken, because while I was listening to your sermon, I was thinking about how so many people are driven by their fear of God and the things that they're willing to do because they're driven by their fear of God. And reading the story of Herod and his slaughtering, actually has a name, the slaughtering of the innocents. I mean, I think back. I mean, obviously, I identify as a Christian, so I'm making a self-identification here. But Christianity has been the villain in history many times, and I think that is often driven by a fear of who we think God is and what we think God's expectations are. And when we think about the people that have been driven away from the church, have been driven away from God by people who are telling them, this is the only thing that God will accept, and you are not this, so God will not accept you. And I know of people who have come to the point in their lives where they feel like they are so unacceptable that they've taken their own lives. And so in that respect, I wonder how responsible we may be ourselves for the slaughter of the innocents based on our fear of what we think God is or wants.
Or what God's willing to put up with from us, I think, too. I know when you have that fear and you're just you're rowing up, just like upriver so hard that you forget that if you just turned around and let Andy used to say something. He said it's always easier to get a ship moving after it's out of port, but as long as you move in the right direction, have a little faith that God will start to move you. And what you just said just makes me think, I mean, so many people pop in my head right now, friends that I've lost to suicide, and friends that are searching so hard for something right now, and you pray that they find it, but then you also know of the very instances that are holding them back, and you felt the same way. Somehow, everyone deals with it different. Somehow you came out on the other side at least okay, or able to see God's working in it, but they don't. And then that's what breaks my heart, is when you find people that are just struggling so hard, but they've never had that confirmation from even us to be an uplifter.
And I would go even further to say that a lot of people who are, sort of outright rejecting God are not actually rejecting God. They're rejecting the picture of God that they've been given. And so I think if people had the opportunity to see an expanded picture of who God is, then maybe it wouldn't be an outright rejection.
Yeah, that's fair, because I think what they see in us is we're always sending out something. We're always portraying something. And if we're calling ourselves Christian, people assume that what we're sending out is the love of Jesus. And whether we're really doing that, if that's our focus and that's our desire even, will show. So whether we're being actively cognizant about, okay, was I really working? Was I was Jesus in me today? Was that what I showed in my response to whoever it is? Even if it's Melanie, who's perfectly fine in her faith, but Ken's watching and he's like, man, he was a real jerk to her. I thought he was supposed to be a Christian. Melanie knows Randy and goes, oh, it's okay. He was having a bad day. He didn't get his coffee or whatever. She understands. But that does nothing for Ken, who's just like, man, that guy, I don't know. I mean, why would I want to be a part of any of that? But to think about that makes it even heavier to think about how much we influence what people see as that picture of God.
Didn't mean to expand the whole villain rabbit hole that we just went down.
No.
No, I think that's good because I think, honestly, that's so much about, I think, what we tackle on the podcast too is, people share with a lot of different people, and I get notes from people that I shared it with this friend or that friend. And so for anyone listening, I mean, I hope you know that at least here in this room and at WholeLife Church, we're very understanding that we are not perfect people in any way. We're all
Definitely
here broken, and we're all here trying to do our best to be the best reflection of Christ that we can be. But we're just as broken as anybody else, and everybody's welcome here. And
so, yeah, I think there's two responsibilities. I think there's the responsibility of the person that we all do need to remember that there are people watching us, and going from being in television, radio, news, you knew people were watching you, but there
Literally.
wasn't quite, all the time, and literally, yes. And but when you were out in public, people were paying attention to the way you behaved and how you act, and you represented your organization. But for me, a far heavier load has been being a pastor, and just kind of realizing that people don't just judge me; they don't just judge the Adventist church. They actually judge God based on that way I behave. And that's something that I think it's irresponsible for me not to think about and not to be aware of, and it doesn't mean I'm perfect or have figured out how to be perfect, but it is something that I think about. It's a weight that I carry and that I think about. The other side of that, though, I think is the responsibility for humanity in general to recognize that people are people. And that, number one, people will make mistakes. We've seen plenty of good people make really bad mistakes. You can, whether it's David, stealing one of his best friend's wife and then murdering the guy. That's a pretty bad mistake.
That's a big one.
That's a pretty big one. To really good people that I know that struggle with a lot of various issues, whether it's alcoholism or other things that they struggle with. I think we have to go ahead and say people are people, and most people, in my opinion, are not trying to intentionally. Yeah. They don't want to hurt others. And then the other part of it is just saying, look, there are other times where maybe you can look at somebody's action in two different ways. You can look at it as they're being rude, or you can think, maybe I just don't understand. Maybe and it's what Brene Brown calls the assumption of good intent. Yep. It's like, I don't like what that person did, but I can also view it as that it wasn't as personal as maybe as I'm telling myself it is. And maybe they felt like they had a good reason for doing what they did. And that can be a really hard thing when somebody does something that's painful to you or hurtful to you, to think, well, maybe they weren't trying to do that to me. And it's a lot easier to be like, oh, they're a horrible person. But I think that we also have the responsibility, particularly as Christians, to have grace and to allow people to be people. And also to assume that sometimes maybe we're misunderstanding intentions, or we don't know everything that's going on in that situation. We don't understand that Randy just needed that one cup of coffee, and life would have been okay.
It would have been okay. And I think it's easy to forget how grace-filled God is. Mm-hmm. And David did that amongst many other things, which was a big one, but he was still known as the man after God's own heart. So at the end, God, while not condoning what he did, also was like, yeah, but there's a lot more to David than just this one mistake. There's grace, there's forgiveness, and there's a chance to continue on and do something great with your life.
Yeah, This reminds me, I was at the car wash this weekend with my wife.
Car wash story. All right, let's do it. Let's do it.
We transitioned there, didn't we?
Yeah. And there were 3 lanes, and the attendant came and opened up a 4th lane. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
So I get into behind 2 other cars that get ahead of me into that lane, but I'm like, yes. And then everything stops. That lane, it completely stops, and I am just beginning to become apoplectic with my, why do I always pick the wrong lane? Why? What's wrong with it? They opened it up. Why did they open it up? And we're just going to sit here for the next 2 hours waiting to get in. And so I'm like, my wife is like, Ken, it's okay. We're having a good time. We've got nowhere that we have to be. I just want to get my car washed. I'm just like losing my mind. And then the next car pulls up, and the lady brings the thing to close the lane. She goes, just come through. Don't worry about paying. And I'm like, oh, thank you. So, sometimes in life, maybe just taking a chill pill and just being,
Well, frankly, I'm a little disappointed that you didn't hit the gas faster, harder, and just not let 2 people in front of you. That third lane.
Lessons we all learn.
And then God comes back. He's like, how about free, Ken? Is that better?
Yeah. So how bad was it to sit here for that? And I was like, well, that was definitely worth it.
That was
definitely worth the extra 5 minutes.
Had you known, right? Isn't that life though? Had you known. All right. Well, as you guys know, we haven't had any response time the last couple of weeks. And how many more before we're back to normal? That's 2 more messages. Right?
Yeah. Let's see. So we've got the 17th, we've got the 24th,
and then
January. No, wait. 31st.
So we got 3 more.
3 more.
All right. Well,
actually, I think we made. I guess on the 31st. I don't guess we're not doing a response, but we're still going to be interactive.
So maybe we'll be able to work that in.
So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Maybe. Could be.
And then what do you have planned, Melanie, after the beginning of the year?
Oh, I have all the things planned. You have to wait and find out.
Okay, cool. I will be patient.
Perfect. That's right. 5 extra minutes or 5 weeks, whatever it is. So I have been scouring the socials, checking out the DMs, and always podcast at WholeLife.Church, 407-965-1607. You can always text us, email, leave a voicemail, and we will take your questions, even though there isn't a spot in the message to do so. Even the chat, we were checking that out this week. But Sean Rhimes, he posted this on Instagram Saturday evening. He said, good evening, the end of another week and closer to Christmas. I watched the second half of the sermon this morning on YouTube. And anyway, I'm a firm believer in the writing of Josephus. I believe he was God's ace. God knew that self-righteous religious leaders would do things to God's word to discredit it, because Josephus was a historian in his day and not a writer for God's word. The self-righteous religious leaders didn't corrupt it. I hope you have a blessed week, and I look forward to hearing back from you. So cool. I was thinking that and I heard from multiple, it was the thing that really got me the most out of the message, other than, we really shouldn't be.
Josephus got you the most.
But really the history and
Saint Josephus.
And right, maybe, and we'll have to talk about that, and we'll give you a ruling by next podcast.
I can give you a ruling right now.
No,
he's not a saint.
Oh man, there was no drama till next week. He just that's it. Dropped the mic. But
good guy. Well, actually, I don't even know if I'll go that far, but he was a good historian. How about that?
But it was really
he was a good pre-Enlightenment historian.
There you go.
Yeah,
I like that. We can agree on that. But I think the way you worked him into the message was very interesting, and not something that you typically hear at Christmas. And it really got everybody's attention, whether it was somebody online or just people rooting about afterwards. I talked to Tony Marino. Him and I were talking after the message, and like I said, I sent it to my mom because I knew she'd find it interesting. She's like, make sure you don't forget to send me next week's link.
Tony listens to this, right?
I think he does. When he's not producing his own podcast.
Episode 350.
Tony, help us out. He's going to be helping
Princess
us out. Oh.
Castle.
Princess Castle? Oh,
Just saying.
Well,
Tony.
All right. Tony and I are going to have lunch either this week or next week. So hold on. Princess Castle, Tony.
Yeah. All right.
He knows how to make
these. You got that already.
Okay.
You got it.
Podcast 350. Lunch, Tony.
And while you're writing all that down, I'd like to address another important issue.
Uh-oh. What's coming up?
I have had multiple people come up to me before and after services and ask me a question that I have to believe, because I've been told if one person asks you as a pastor a question,
Yeah.
then there's probably at least 10 or 15 other people that are thinking the same thing. And they're not saying, have you heard that too,
You think so?
Melanie? Do you think that's true?
Okay.
So the answer is yes, I have lost weight.
Wow. I was like, man.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
So-
no, it's noticeable.
No, I'm just
you're looking
thank
svelte.
you.
Good
Thank
job.
you.
Very
I'm
suave.
just excited about that. So, and I really did have people asking me that, just for the record. Just I didn't want to just. And I'm not just getting on here
Yeah.
bragging, although I would have done it anyway. But
As
yeah,
you know, as we all with the extra COVID-19 or 25 or 30 that we haven't let go of
And
yet.
yet, who right before this podcast was talking about Jeremiah's? I don't know.
We have till 5 p.m., but it doesn't matter
That's
to you
right.
listening
Triple
because
hey,
we
you know
don't
what?
miss that.
Something
It
like
is a
that.
combination of what you eat and working out.
How hard
So-
to work out. At least for another 4 or 5 years, and then it's just all downhill after
Is
that.
it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
All right.
Anyway. All right. Well, one of this week's Whole Life Reflections asked, what would it look like if Jesus had control over your fears? And I think I'll answer at least to the fact that every so often when I'm really good at it and just like do all the right things and for a week or two or more, that it feels really good. Because I think the fear that we have of not letting him take control is much worse than the unknown of, man, he could really take me someplace crazy.
Well, maybe
Because if I do that, right? I think it's two different types of scared. Fear.
Well, I think if Jesus had control of my fears, maybe I wouldn't have fears.
totally
they would-
totally go.
I don't know. If he took total control of it, then I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't have to hang on to any of them.
Maybe I've never really been totally
Sounds like
fearless.
a conversation for another podcast.
I know, right? But it's nice. It's
Join
nice
us
to
next time when we walk on water.
We're gonna have to flood the overflow parking lot. Maybe we can make it work there.
It's practice.
Practice. No, I mean, it's seemingly a simple question, but yet I don't know if I've ever totally just felt like no fear whatsoever. But pretty close sometimes. I feel like, you get into, sometimes you just really feel that relationship and you just go, whatever comes, comes. I'm not going to worry about it. It doesn't seem to last long enough. And so I'm sure that's something I'm missing in there that I'm not doing completely right. But anyway, I just thought that was something to think about. What would it be
Very
like?
interesting.
I think for me, I think I tend to probably process it a little bit like Melanie said it, where maybe I wouldn't have any fears, but then the rational part of me thinks there's always going to be something I want to be afraid about or whatever. And so I guess for me, if I were to give Jesus complete control of all my fears, for me, it would probably look a little bit like when I start feeling afraid, going and spending more time with him rather than trying to figure it out myself, which is what Herod tried to do. He tried to figure it out himself.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. That's good to think about right
I
there.
think that's for me. The thing is that I don't know that it would remove all fear from my life, but it would mean that instead of trying to solve the issue myself, I would try to relax and let Jesus solve it.
I think that's a good way to describe it, because I think sometimes when you kind of leave it to Jesus and you go, man, I'm not sure where this is going, but at least I'm not worried about the outcome. Still maybe different kinds of fear, but I still think it's a better type of fear that we just need to work that. If we work that last little bit out, man, that could be really good. So quick shout out to Lee. I didn't catch your last name. It was at the little get together on Friday night, and also a special hello to Mr. Tim Nashville. Tim had a wonderful conversation on
Hi,
Friday
Talking
night.
about Lee Bennett?
No, he was a tall gentleman, and he told me he listens to the podcast every week and loves it, and so it was just I don't remember he told me his last name, and Lee, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's Numa's husband.
Yes.
And my last names
but
are
that didn't
not.
help me.
That's your claim to fame, Lee. You are Numa's husband.
Yeah, well, the first time, I've been Heather's
Numa's
husband for a long time.
one of our worship coordinators, and Lee's awesome.
Yeah.
He's a great guy.
Yeah, so
Thanks for listening, Lee.
yeah, special shout out. He said doesn't miss, so that's wonderful. We appreciate that. All right, our final thoughts are from the near ending of Ken's message. I don't know why I wrote it that way. I don't like it. I'll try better next time.
Just edit that out.
I can edit that out probably, but well, what's the difference? We're being transparent now, aren't we? Jesus invites you today to not be afraid of him, but to come to him and find peace in him. In a violent, hard, mean, nasty world that we live in today, Jesus wants to be your Prince of Peace this Christmas season. And if there was any way to give him control over your fears, that sounds like a pretty good way to hit the Christmas season. So next week, we are in that's going to be part 4, Arise to Unexpected Opportunities.
We're looking at the innkeeper and the shepherds. We're going to do a compare and contrast.
Innkeeper and shepherds. Yeah. I missed that part. Okay.
No, it's okay. I do what I want to. I put the notes down, then I do what I'm going to do anyway. So when it comes that's not your fault. When
it comes to titling episodes, I guess I just do what I want, right? just put it in.
Just kind of keep in mind we make these things up months ahead of time, and then I actually sit down and write the sermon about a week before the thing, and things change. I'm like, I was looking at the text all wrong. Now I want to look at it this way. So
yeah, well, that works. We can do that. All right.
We're going to be so.
Oh yeah,
So this next week. If I could retitle the sermon, I'd call it "Finding Your Joy." Finding your joy, and it's the difference between the innkeeper and the shepherds. Finding your joy. Anyway, and
after
this
the service,
week,
right?
What?
Something special after the service?
Yes, it's really important. After the service this week, after second service, we are having a little cupcakes and a celebration, a little drop in and say thank you to Richard and Tammy for 11 plus years of service in the roles that they're in. I know that Tammy's been serving here at the church longer than that in other roles. And so we want to just thank them for what they've done. This is Richard's last official Sabbath in his role, and then Tammy's last official will be the 31st, and then Melanie will be flying solo.
That's
and
right.
So there you go. So, but we're really wanting to go ahead and do a little reception for them after the second service. If you come to first service, that's okay. If you bring a card or you want to write in one of the books that we have out in the lobby, those will be out there. If you're not able to stay through, you're going to miss out on the cupcakes. That's all.
Yeah, you won't have to take your metformin after that, so you'll be fine.
But this Sabbath is our big Christmas celebration. So this is a great Sabbath I've already had. Shout out to Dale, who told me he's going to bring 2 friends of his to to this. He's invited to come, and I've heard from a number of our church members who have invited friends, family, colleagues from work.
So maybe first service is your best bet.
It's going to be. I am going to tell you, it's going to be a full house for sure. Second service, I think we'll be looking for space, and I'm thinking first service will be pretty full too. So come early and make sure that your guests get the right seats. And if you didn't bring guests, make sure that our guests get good seats.
That's true too.
Yeah,
that's true too. Excellent. Well, that's going to do it for this week. So thanks everybody for listening. And now is a perfect time of year. Share the podcast. You can make this your Christmas gift.
There you go.
Just take the link and put it in a nice text message, and then you can just be like, Merry Christmas. Thought you might like something to listen to on your way to work or while you have lunch or whatever.
Yeah.
These guys are pretty good. Not bad anyway.
Merry Christmas. Great.
Great. So a great
We were
Christmas.
good before, but now that Melanie's here, we're great.
That's right. And we're working now towards being awesome. It's going to happen.
That's the direction.
It's the direction. Only upward from here.
That's right.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a great week.